anyway, Kyle basically, Luke has a friend, a professor that he corresponds a lot with, and Luke was reading his take on sort of, maybe whites should learn from the Torah and learn the Jewish lesson of separating oneself from the outside society, right? And Kyle's reaction was very much that Jews have learned that they will never be allowed, or they will never allow themselves to be segregated from again. I mean, he was very sort of triumphant about it in a certain level, that his feeling was that was the Jewish position, that the Jewish interest was not to want to be segregated from particularly white Gentiles. And I wonder what you think about that, Halsey.
Well, I mean, my feeling on that in general, I mean, you've heard what I've said about Europe. There are certain populations that I don't care about assigning blame. They're not able to live together. Okay? For some reason, Europeans and Jews fit that mold perfectly. I mean, they are incapable of living together in a way that doesn't cause animosity, that doesn't cause violence. So I don't believe that there should be a Jewish population in Europe. There's no need for it right now. And there is a place for them to go. There are places that they could go and be wanted elsewhere, and there would be an end of the animosity. I don't believe that animosity exists so much in America. So, and that's why I don't have a problem with people who want to be together to be together. So I think that most Jews, even the left-wing ones who I'm sure I'm going to be at war with at some point, which I fully accept,
yeah.
They like to LARP as Jews when it comes to criticism, but they don't see themselves as Jews. They see themselves as commies or left-wingers or whatever it is they define themselves as. The Jewish part is an excuse. It's the African in African American. They're just not allowed to call themselves a Jewish American. They're not that intersectional. But I would think in the end of any conflict, they're either going to win or lose. So they're not going to take the side of separation, and they'll fight against it. And eventually the separatists will fight against them, and there'll be a winner or a loser, and this whole conversation is moot. But I don't believe there needs to be a symbiotic relationship if that symbiotic relationship isn't wanted by the majority of both parties. And I don't think it's necessary either, personally.
I think it's the fundamental issue. It's that I agree with Brundlefly. They will not want to separate. Essentially, they feel entitled to white prisons. And that's what people have been pointing out for centuries, even. That the big problem, ultimately, is that, yes, we understand that being a Jewish minority of 1% in America is a very pleasant position to be. I understand that if you were to be isolated to your own country, you would end up paying the price of your desires, and you would find out that your desires are incompatible with your own existence, and that eventually you would either change your mind or you would continue on that ever revolutionary route. As they say, they will identify sometimes as communist, sometimes as anarchist, but ultimately it's the questioning of any structure that would undermine their existence if there wasn't a bunch of white people around them to maintain a form of structure from which they benefit. If they had to live with the price of their own political preferences, they wouldn't be in such a wealthy nation.
So that's a great point.
Someone said, well, why is it that all the Dems vote left when it's the Republicans that seem to virtue signal to the Jews so hard? First of all, the Republicans virtue signal to everybody. It's just nobody believes them. And secondly, there is a virtue signaling to Israeli Jews. And there's a reason why. That's because of military technology and because of the relationships between the people who fund the Republicans and the Israeli Jews. Those Republicans don't virtue signal to left-wing Jews. And I'm quite sure if you were to ask any of them in a place where they wouldn't get shot for saying it, like...
They are when Steve King is stuck saying to left-wing Jews. I'm not an anti-Semite. I despise these ideologies. Racism is the worst thing. White nationalism is disgusting. They are stuck in a scheme of extortion.
But is that
And
towards Jews? He didn't specific, as far as I know, he didn't specifically say Jews.
Well, he didn't, but who were the authors of the articles against him? They were Jewish writers in the mainstream media. So it's a whole extortion scheme, and I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong here. I just think you're missing a part of the reality where, yes, the Republicans are currently pandering to leftist extortion, where they're essentially saying, the leftists are saying to the Republicans, if you don't disavow, if you don't stand for our belief in the public space, we will call you an anti-Semite and your life will be ruined.
But I'll completely agree with that. Like that, I won't disagree. I mean, what I was saying was that, from what I gathered, Steve King he was saying there's nothing wrong with being white. He wasn't specifically saying there is something wrong with being black or Jewish or anything like that. The SJW brigades that come out and go after someone at that point, it's impossible to even virtue signal to all of them because they're all there. You know, yes, the Jews will call him an anti-Semite. The blacks will call him a racist. The Mexicans will call him a xenophobe. That I see. I don't argue against that. I know that exists.
All right.
But my point was that the real virtue signaling has always been towards Israel. That's where the Republicans, they don't need a cause to go for Israel. They don't need Steve King to say something for them to come out and promote Israel and to virtue signal to Israel. They'll initiate the conversation, right?
Yeah.
But they definitely do not see Israeli Jews and American Jews as the same thing, or at least the same money or the same anything. So I don't think that the fact that Jews vote left here, I don't think that influences their decision one way or the other in the way they virtue signal to Israel. That's what I was trying to bring about. So
wonderful.
So it's hard to say, well, the Republicans would be on our side for a separate society or for a right-wing society, because they're not. You know, they're basically like left-wingers that don't like abortion or left-wingers that don't like taxes. You know, I mean, that's basically what they are at this point. But what I'm saying is that a coalition of right could easily take on the media, could easily take on academia. Like, these are not military institutions. These are not institutions where they will fight and win. You know, they'll fight in PR world, but they will not physically fight.
Well, I don't know, Halsey, because, you know, the thing that I'm concerned about, sort of the noose hanging around Trump's neck with this Mueller thing. Like, at any moment, I get the sense that if they don't do what, if Trump doesn't do what the establishment wants him to do, they will pull the trigger on releasing the story about how he's colluded with Russia. At the same time, it is within Google, Facebook, Twitter's power to, even GoDaddy, to completely destroy the alt media in one. They would destroy it in one fell swoop, and there would be nothing that we could do about countering the mainstream media narrative. I mean, maybe it could be a year later that after the courts like reinstate things, maybe, but like in the meantime, like they could completely take us back to 1985 in terms of their ability to control narratives, and then we'd be toast.
I mean, I agree. I'm looking at there's obviously an argument going on in the chat about this, and I address this all the time. In America, there is not an inherent anti-Semitism like there is in Europe. And I always say I'm perfectly happy not calling myself white. I don't need to virtue signal that I am or not. I don't really care. But that's not a prevailing argument in America that Jews are not white. It's not something you're going to find, not even in the mainstream, but not even in the far right. It's the far right that sees that. So that's what I was saying, that right-wing Jew, left-wing Jew, it's the minorities all see Jews as white. Like, that's hands down. They see Jews as the beneficiaries of white privilege. They see them as, you know, whatever. So I do see there being the ability to fight a common enemy, which is basically all I was saying.
No, it's interesting, Halsey, because I've always seen like sort of and I don't even know if it's the most likely route, but sort of the best possible solution for sort of this Jewish white Gentile conflict that is clearly going on is that Jews would recognize, or left-wing Jews, whatever you want to call it, the majority of Jews would recognize that the anti-white propaganda that they see themselves as benefiting from is going to come bite them in the ass. And that, as Frame Game Radio put it, like the white America that has been so good to the Jews requires white people, and that their fear of sort of like masculine Christian nationalism, not necessarily, but in their mind personified by the Third Reich, is not a true threat in America, provided that they're not seen as actively undermining our society. And so if they would just stop pushing, it could be all good.
I don't see that happening. I just don't. I see it's the same thing as the black community, and I hate to compare the two, but you're not going to get the majority of blacks, or even a decent minority, to say our society is broken, stop welfare, stop job assistance. It's not going to happen. We even if we want it to, even if we dream it could be, when we see like Candace Owens on TV and we go, oh, she's going to affect change. No, it's just not going to happen. This is something that I've said this to alt-right people, I've said this to alt-left people, whatever you want. I've lived in an ethno-state. I lived in Israel, right? It didn't work for me. It wasn't something I enjoyed. It wasn't something that I didn't find the political discourse to be something that I found healthy. And it was somewhere I didn't want to raise my children under the constant eye of I don't even know how to explain it. I can explain it this way. When you talk politics there, you're talking about birth rate. And there's nothing wrong with a politician saying we want to increase the Jewish birth rate, right? And then offering some kind of incentive. Now, will the Arabs take advantage of it in Israel? Sure, but they're already a minority. So if you increase them both at the same rate, you're keeping one a minority anyway. But there's nothing wrong with saying that because there's an ethnicity to the state. To me, I don't see that as being like, I don't find it my duty to have babies to increase the Jewish population. I see it as a duty to increase my family and to increase my society and to work for everybody. So it was just foreign to me, and I didn't also like the idea of my country being a cause. Like you have to be there. This is where you're meant to be, and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you notice you're losing yourself. That you're not you're not an individual anymore. You're part of a cause, one that you don't even particularly care about anymore. So it didn't work for me. I can't imagine I would consider it working for me in the future as well.
Well, it's interesting because in some ways, America has become a bit of the same thing. I mean, the propaganda, what you're speaking to with this sort of coercive propaganda, justifying them taking your money from you, for some abstract ideal of the state or the cause. I mean, the same thing is going on here. I mean, we've seen a shift. We've seen a shift away from freedom, or the corruption of freedom rhetoric. I mean, we talk about equality. We also talk about how poverty makes people less free. So we've got to give people money to be more free, and the cause of freedom, and America is the greatest country on earth, and things like this. I mean, patriotism. I mean, I grew up, I was always a flag waving guy. I mean, I see troops, I see some things, like it moves me emotionally, and it still does. But it's a manipulation. And I think Israel is not, or ethno-states in general are not unique in that that their populaces are manipulated by their elites for whatever goal.